the fact that right now there are thousands of people across the world having sex. It's kind of disconcerting when you think about it, especially when you realize you're sitting here listening to me. But when I tell you that some of these people are with partners of the same sex and some of these people are with partners of the other sex, that fact seems to take on a significance all its own. And the question I want to explore tonight is, why? What's morally wrong with homosexuality, if anything? And if nothing, what's all the fuss about? This is a wonderful, beautiful part of the human experience. If we're going to deny this to a whole group of people saying, you can't have that, that's wrong, we'd better have a darn good reason. Homosexuality is a threat to the moral fabric of our country. It's a threat to the nation's infrastructure. How does what I do in bed threaten the nation's infrastructure? I might think I'm powerful in bed, but whoa, that's a crazy claim. Nation's infrastructure better watch out tonight, baby. They had this argument in their mind that the parts don't fit. And I realized that if I was going to address people's actual concerns, I would have to address this argument. So I actually have two responses to this argument. First response, yes, they do. How do I know? Well, because if they didn't, people would try it, it wouldn't work, and they'd go do something else. I mean, what's that scenario going to look like? Oh my God, the parts don't fit. What are we going to do? I don't know. Do you want to go bowling? Sure, this isn't working. I would actually have people during the Q&A portion of my program, I'm not making this up, they would say, well, of course it's wrong because... And I want to say, if you're doing it this way, you're doing it wrong. What do you want me to tell you? When we talk about heterosexuality, we talk about that wide range of activities. When we talk about homosexuality, we focus on the sex part of it. This is not the only time we get this sort of false contrast. I mean, we say things. We say, heterosexual people, we talk about relationships. Homosexual people, we talk about sex. We say heterosexual people have lives. Homosexual people have lifestyles. We say heterosexual people have a moral vision. Homosexual people have an agenda. The words we use to talk about these things really affect our way of thinking about them. And when we look to that Judeo-Christian Bible, we find some things that actually sound pretty negative with respect to same-sex relationships. The book of Leviticus says, man shall not lie with man as with woman. It is an abomination unto God. Of course, the book of Leviticus calls a number of other things abominations that we don't tend to pay attention to quite as often. The Bible suggests that those who divorce and remarry should be put to death. Why? Well, because the New Testament defines divorce as adultery. The Old Testament prescribes death for adultery. The Bible suggests that slavery is morally acceptable. And I say, the Bible contains no error. What are you going to do with those slavery passages? And you know what the people say to me? They say, John, you are pulling those passages out of context. You can't just take passages out of the Bible and quote them as if they mean the same thing today as they did for the people at the time. You can't just pull the passages out of context. And I say, well, wait a second. If it's not okay to do that with the slavery passages, why is it okay to do that with the homosexuality passages? And there was a priest, Father Pryor, who wrote to the school paper. He was very upset that I had been invited to give this lecture, and he wrote this long letter to the school paper. And in his letter to the school paper, one of the things he said was, of course homosexuality is bad for society. If everyone were homosexual, there would be no society. I'm going to write to the school paper too. So I did. I wrote an open letter to Father Pryor. It said, Dear Father Pryor, if everyone were a Roman Catholic priest, there'd be no society either. What about AIDS? Doesn't homosexuality cause AIDS? No. Virus causes AIDS, and that virus can be passed along by homosexual activity, by heterosexual activity, by some activities that are not sexual at all. And furthermore, if AIDS risk were somehow supposed to be the barometer of morality, lesbians would be the most moral people in the world. Because from the standpoint of AIDS risk, lesbian sex is the way to go. I mean, think about it. Surgeon General recommends lesbianism. Okay, it's probably not going to happen, but there was a legislator when I lived in Texas, Warren Chisholm, who used to love this argument. He said, homosexuality is unnatural. Animals don't do that. Since when did animals start providing us with our moral standards? particularly in the area of sex. I want to make you a promise, and I've made this promise to hundreds of audiences, so I've got to follow through on this if it ever happens. If I ever encounter Warren Chisholm in public, I'm going to get down on the ground and start humping his leg. Just to drive home the point that animals do not provide us with our moral standards, and even if they did, well, then homosexuality wouldn't be a problem, because not only do animals engage in homosexual sex, some actually form homosexual pair bonds. During one of these discussions, my mother said, "I just do not understand why you have to be so open about your sexuality. Your father and I are not open about our sexuality." I want you to think about that sentence. Your father and I are not open about our sexuality. Not only is the person who utters that sentence openly heterosexual, she's open about having had sex at least once. Heterosexual people do this all the time. They talk about their wives and their husbands, their boyfriends and their girlfriends, people they have crushes on. Perfectly normal. We do the exact same thing, and we're flaunting it. We're making an issue out of it. And that's a double standard, and it's not fair. I think a big part of the solution is for straight people to actually get to know gay and lesbian people, because only then do we come to realize that we have many of the same hopes and dreams, fears and challenges as everyone else. I think the way gay and lesbian people are treated in our society is wrong. Not just irrational, but morally wrong. I think there's something perverted about the fact that we hate people because of whom they love. We do violence against people because of the affection that exists in their lives. And the effects of that treatment are a far greater moral tragedy than sex between consenting adults could ever be. I'm asking you to put yourself in people's shoes before you judge them. And I'm asking you to judge people not on whom they love, but on whether they love. That's my moral vision. That's my agenda. And I thank you for listening so patiently to it tonight. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much.